All right, let's dive into our list. First up, at number 10, we encounter the infamous Tully Monster, a creature that doesn't just challenge classification, it shatters it entirely. In 1958, an intrepid amateur fossil hunter named Francis Tully was meticulously sifting through the Mazon Creek fossil beds in Illinois. He cracked open an ordinary-looking concretion only to discover something utterly extraordinary, a specimen that, by all accounts, should not have existed. The creature he unearthed was roughly 14 inches long and eerily torpedo-shaped. It sported a remarkably long, extraordinarily flexible proboscis that ended in a claw, itself wickedly lined with sharp, serrated teeth. Its eyes were perhaps its most unsettling feature, protruding grotesquely from the sides of its body on a rigid bar, conjuring an image reminiscent of a hammerhead shark stretched and distorted into a grotesque, geometric nightmare. Tully, understandably excited, brought his peculiar find to the prestigious Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, fully expecting the resident scientists to swiftly identify it within a matter of days. To his astonishment, they couldn't. More than 6 decades have since passed, and the scientific community remains just as baffled, unable to definitively classify this perplexing enigma. Formerly christened Tullimonstrum gregarium, this creature, affectionately dubbed the Tully Monster, thrived approximately 300 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period. Back then, what we now know as Illinois was a warm, shallow sea nestled on the sun-drenched edge of a vibrant tropical coastline. Thousands upon thousands of these specimens have been meticulously recovered from the Mazon Creek Formation, making it one of the most abundantly found fossils in the entire region. Its iconic status was solidified in 1989 when it was officially designated the Illinois State Fossil. Schoolchildren across the state learn its peculiar name. Tourists eagerly purchase miniature replicas from museum gift shops, and dedicated scientists have built their entire careers around its study. Universities host entire conferences devoted solely to unraveling its mysteries. And yet, despite all this attention, not a single researcher on Earth can definitively tell us what precise kind of animal the Tully Monster truly was. The fundamental problem lies in its utter uniqueness. The Tully Monster simply doesn't fit into any known branch of the intricate tree of life. Its bizarre body plan bears no resemblance whatsoever to anything else documented in the fossil record, whether living or long extinct. In 2016, a team of brilliant researchers at Yale published a groundbreaking paper in the prestigious journal Nature, confidently proclaiming they had at last cracked the enduring mystery. Their bold assertion was that this creature was, in fact, a vertebrate, specifically a primitive relative of the lamprey. They based this conclusion on a structure they interpreted as a notochord, running conspicuously along its body. For a fleeting moment, the scientific community celebrated with cautious optimism. The Tully Monster, it seemed, finally had a place within the grand lineage of life. Textbooks were eagerly updated, museum placards were hastily rewritten, and the long-standing mystery appeared to be resolved once and for all. But then, in 2017, another equally determined team of researchers published a direct, scathing rebuttal. They argued forcefully that the very structure identified as a notochord was, in reality, nothing more than a gut trace. Furthermore, the chemical analysis of the fossils revealed no discernible evidence of vertebrate tissue. The Tully Monster, it was confirmed, was not a vertebrate after all. The mystery, far from being solved, had deepened once more. Adding to the confusion in 2023, yet another team, employing cutting-edge advanced imaging techniques, concluded with certainty that the creature absolutely could not be a vertebrate, primarily because its complex eye structure was fundamentally incompatible with any known vertebrate anatomy. It's a recurring pattern. Every few years, a new paper emerges, confidently claiming to have finally solved the elusive mystery. And then, with disheartening regularity every few years, another paper swiftly dismantles that proposed solution, leaving us back at square one. This creature stubbornly refuses to stay classified. It effortlessly slips through every single category and taxonomic box we attempt to construct for it. What makes the Tully Monster particularly unsettling, even profoundly disturbing, is the profound implication of its very existence. The Carboniferous seas of 300 million years ago were not some obscure evolutionary backwater. They were a thoroughly documented, intensely studied ecosystem, teeming with creatures whose modern-day relatives we can readily trace. Horseshoe crabs thrived then, and they thrive now. Sharks patrolled those ancient waters, and they continue to swim in our oceans today. The distant ancestors of modern insects diligently crawled along the sandy shorelines. Yet here, swimming amidst the easily recognizable ancestors of fish and arthropods, was something utterly unique, a creature that left behind no descendants, no clear relatives, and no discernible evolutionary lineage. It existed in enormous numbers. It flourished and thrived within its ecosystem. And then, as mysteriously as it appeared, it vanished completely, leaving not a single evolutionary trace behind. It was quite literally erased from the annals of biology itself. The truly disquieting aspect, the chilling possibility that the Tully Monster represents, forces us to confront a humbling truth. If an animal this abundant, this remarkably well-preserved, and this intensely studied can defy every single attempt at classification, then how many other vast, intricate branches of life once existed that we have entirely missed? The tree of life we so confidently teach in our textbooks is not a complete, infallible map. It is, by its very nature, a partial reconstruction, painstakingly pieced together from tantalizing, often ambiguous fragments. The Tully Monster serves as a stark, powerful reminder that evolution once produced entire, complex body plans that we, with all our modern scientific advancements, cannot even begin to categorize. And then, with an almost cosmic indifference, it erased them with such absolute completeness that only a single, remote fossil bed in Illinois remembers they ever existed at all. Hidden in the depths of time, countless kingdoms of life may have emerged and vanished, leaving behind not even the faintest trace. The Tully Monster is not merely a single enigma. It serves as a stark warning that the fossil record upon which we so heavily depend is riddled with silences, gaps we cannot perceive or interpret. This brings us to number 9, Hallucigenia, the creature assembled upside down. In 1977, paleontologist Simon Conway Morris meticulously catalogued fossils from the Burgess Shale. This 508-million-year-old fossil bed, nestled in the Canadian Rockies, preserves some of Earth's most ancient and complex animals. Conway Morris stumbled upon a creature so bizarre that he christened it Hallucigenia, a name reflecting its dreamlike, otherworldly appearance. His initial reconstruction depicted a worm-like body, seemingly walking on 7 pairs of rigid spikes, with a row of waving tentacles protruding from its back, and a blob at one end that Conway Morris identified as its head. It truly looked like something a child might invent if asked to draw an alien. For nearly 15 years, this image of Hallucigenia was the undisputed scientific representation, gracing textbooks and museum displays across the globe. Students memorized it. Researchers painstakingly built theories around it. Then, in 1991, new specimens unearthed in China revealed a seismic truth. Conway Morris had pieced together the creature entirely incorrectly. The menacing spikes were not legs. They were, in fact, defensive spines crowning its back. The delicate tentacles were not decorations. They were its actual legs. Scientists had been contemplating Hallucigenia completely upside down for more than a decade. Once the reconstruction was flipped, the creature suddenly made far more sense. Now walking on soft, flexible legs with a protective row of rigid spines shielding its back from predators. Every textbook required revision. Every museum display needed rebuilding. 15 years of scientific literature had to be reinterpreted, but the mystery was far from over. In 2015, researchers at the University of Cambridge, employing advanced electron microscopy, subjected specimens to even closer scrutiny and uncovered yet another profound error. The enigmatic blob that scientists had confidently identified as the creature's head for nearly 40 years was not a head at all. It was rather a mere stain of decomposed gut contents, leaking from its true head, which was situated at the opposite end of its body. Hallucigenia had been reconstructed with its front and back reversed. For decades, scientists had painstakingly studied its tail, mistakenly calling it a face. The creature had been inadvertently walking backward through every single scientific paper ever written about it. This error had been propagated from researcher to researcher for almost half a century. The real head, once finally identified, unveiled something even stranger. Hallucigenia possessed a ring of tiny teeth lining its throat, spaced along a circular mouth, with an additional set of needle-like teeth extending deeper into its esophagus. Its eyes were minuscule and rudimentary, barely more than pigment spots. This creature, which thrived 508 million years ago in the Cambrian seas, bore no resemblance to anything alive today. Its closest living relatives are velvet worms, small, obscure creatures that inhabit tropical forests and squirt adhesive slime at their prey. Yet Hallucigenia is so profoundly different from velvet worms that the connection is only detectable through microscopic anatomical details, which themselves took decades to identify. The family resemblance is so incredibly faint that it almost borders on invisible. What makes Hallucigenia particularly unsettling is the chilling lesson it imparts about the inherent limits of scientific reconstruction. For 40 years, the world's foremost paleontologists meticulously studied this fossil, published countless papers, and confidently elucidated its anatomy in textbooks. They were wrong about which end was its head. They were wrong about which side was up. They were even wrong about the purpose of its spines. Virtually every major feature of the creature was fundamentally misidentified, and this colossal error persisted through decades of peer review and professional scrutiny because no one dared to question the original interpretation. The experts were confidently, publicly, and repeatedly wrong, and disturbingly, no one seemed to notice. The truly unsettling implication is stark and simple. Hallucigenia is but one among thousands of fossils recovered from the Cambrian explosion. That incredibly narrow window, 540 million years ago, when nearly every major animal body plan on Earth materialized almost simultaneously. If scientists could be so profoundly mistaken about Hallucigenia, one of the most famous and extensively scrutinized Cambrian fossils for 40 long years, how much more wrong could they still be about the countless others? We have to ask, how many ancient organisms in the sprawling fossil record are currently being reconstructed backward, upside down, or patched together from entirely incorrect pieces? The ancient Cambrian seas teemed with animals possessing body plans that have no modern equivalents. Creatures with 5 eyes, bizarre beings that navigated with fins atop their heads, and organisms resembling tulips rooted to the seabed. We are peering at the very genesis of animal life itself through a fractured lens, and we have no idea how many of our interpretations might still be inverted. The truth of the Cambrian era could be far stranger than anything we have pieced together thus far. Moving to number 8, let's talk about the Carolina butchering ground and the mammoths that died in Erie Formation. Deep within the swamps of South Carolina, buried beneath countless layers of peat and sediment, lies a site that threatens to upend everything we once believed about North America's prehistoric mass extinctions. The Toba site, strategically positioned along the Savannah River, reveals undeniable evidence of human activity extending back at least 16,000 years, and potentially as far as 50,000 years, depending on which expert you consult. Yet, the most astonishing discoveries have emerged from a nearby bone bed. Here, the remains of mammoths, mastodons, and ancient bison are piled in ways that utterly defy any natural explanation. These bones are not scattered randomly as they would be if the animals had perished naturally and had been slowly buried by floods or accumulated sediment over vast stretches of time. Instead, they are tightly clustered, with multiple individuals of the same species concentrated in very specific locations. Many of these bones bear clear cut marks entirely consistent with sophisticated butchering techniques made by stone tools specifically designed to strip meat efficiently from bone. Some of the skulls even show puncture wounds, chillingly consistent with deliberate, fatal killing blows. These animals did not die of old age or succumb to disease. They were systematically killed, meticulously processed, and their remains were left in organized patterns that strongly suggest systematic hunting on a staggering scale. A scale that challenges our current understanding. The ground itself is a prehistoric crime scene, frozen perfectly in time. What makes this revelation particularly unsettling is the sheer age of the oldest evidence found here. Mainstream archaeology typically posits the first human arrival in North America at around 15,000 years ago, based on the well-documented Clovis culture, whose distinctive spear points suddenly appear across the continent at that period. But the Toba site contains stone tools and unequivocally butchered bones that some researchers confidently date to periods well before Clovis. This suggests that humans were actively hunting megafauna in the Americas thousands of years earlier than our history books currently allow. If these oldest dates are indeed correct, human beings were not merely present, but were actively killing mammoths in South Carolina even before the last glacial maximum had begun its icy reign. The implications of this rewrite the entire human history of the continent. They fundamentally rewrite the timeline of human expansion across the planet itself. This bone bed provides compelling evidence of coordinated group hunting. The colossal animals appear to have been deliberately driven into specific locations, quite possibly into treacherous swampy areas where they became hopelessly mired in the thick mud and then systematically dispatched. The precise butchering patterns suggest that these ancient hunters knew exactly how to efficiently dismember a mammoth, removing all the high-value cuts of meat and abandoning only the parts they deemed unnecessary. This is clearly not the haphazard work of opportunistic scavengers or solitary hunters. This denotes industrial-scale killing, performed by organized groups possessing specialized knowledge, advanced stone tool technology, and carefully coordinated strategies. These hunters had honed their skills. They had done this before, many times, in many different places, across countless generations. Their skill was ancestral, a finely tuned expertise passed down through bloodlines we can only imagine and not trace. The truly unsettling aspect is what these sites imply about the cataclysmic extinction event that marked the end of the Pleistocene epoch. Around 13,000 years ago, North America tragically lost more than 30 genera of large mammals, a staggering tally that included mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, formidable saber-toothed cats, and terrifying dire wolves. The precise cause of this massive die-off has been debated for many decades. Some scientists attribute it to sweeping climate change as the last brutal ice age drew to a close. Others squarely blame human overhunting. A controversial yet compelling theory suggests that a comet impact triggered a catastrophic environmental collapse, delivering the final, devastating blow. The Topper site, along with other similar groundbreaking discoveries, paints a chilling picture. Humans were already culling megafauna on a massive scale thousands of years before the extinction crescendo. This relentless hunting may have pushed these colossal creatures to the brink long before climate shifts or any other factor delivered the final crushing blow. The giants, it seems, were dying even as the ice still held the continent in its frozen grip. What haunts researchers most is the sheer precision of the butchering marks found at these sites. These were not the desperate, haphazard kills of starving hunters scrambling for survival. No, these animals were processed with methodical care, their vast quantities of meat expertly harvested, their bones neatly discarded in organized piles. Whoever wrought this destruction knew their craft intimately. They had clearly done this many, many times before, leaving behind a sprawling graveyard in the swamps of South Carolina. This ancient charnel ground, preserved for over 13,000 years, stands as stark evidence of a systematic slaughter. A slaughter that may well have been instrumental in wiping an entire age of giants from the face of North America. We can only speculate how many more such sites lie hidden beneath our modern world, their ancient hunting stories waiting to shatter and rewrite the established timeline of human impact on the planet. Every hidden swamp, every meandering riverbank, every silted-up lakebed could conceal another mass grave we have yet to uncover. The extinction of the megafauna, once a profound mystery, may turn out to be no mystery at all. It may simply be a crime scene that we are only now beginning to investigate. Our seventh revelation takes us to the Devonian forests that inadvertently poisoned the oceans. Approximately 380 million years ago, during the Devonian period, Earth bore witness to an event unprecedented in the long saga of life. The very first true forests emerged onto the scene. Trees equipped with pioneering deep root systems, sturdy woody trunks, and intricate vascular tissue spread rapidly across the continents. They utterly transformed landscapes previously dominated by low-lying plants and primitive mosses. This should have been a glorious triumph for life, a green revolution setting the stage for every forest ecosystem that would ever follow. Instead, it tragically triggered one of the largest mass extinctions in Earth's entire history, and scientists are still grappling to understand precisely how this ecological catastrophe unfolded. The late Devonian extinction event, a cataclysm that unfurled in multiple devastating pulses over roughly 25 million years, obliterated approximately 75% of all species on Earth. The ocean suffered the most brutal impact. Coral reefs that had flourished for tens of millions of years collapsed entirely, taking a staggering 100 million years to fully recover. Entire groups of marine animals vanished without a trace, including the vast majority of armored fish, countless trilobite species, and myriad reef-building organisms. The seas themselves became anoxic, completely devoid of oxygen, leaving behind sinister black shales rich in organic matter, but utterly desolate of life. And here's the kicker. This timing aligns almost perfectly, with chilling precision, with the monumental spread of those very first forests. The correlation is simply too precise to dismiss. The connection seems counterintuitive, even paradoxical at first glance. How could towering trees growing on land possibly exterminate fish in the deep ocean? The answer lies hidden in the fundamental chemistry of soil. Before the advent of deep-rooted trees, soils were notoriously thin and gravely poor in nutrients. But with the arrival of trees, their extensive root systems began to relentlessly break apart bedrock, meticulously extracting minerals and thereby creating the very first deep, rich soils in Earth's history. When rain then fell upon these freshly created soils, it washed colossal quantities of dissolved nutrients, particularly phosphorus, into rivers, and ultimately into the vast oceans. The seas were suddenly deluged with a fertilizer flood on a scale the planet had never witnessed before. The trees were, unknowingly yet relentlessly, feeding the water with poison. The forests themselves had become weapons, though no creature had ever designed them as such. What inevitably followed was an algal bloom of truly planetary proportions. Massive populations of phytoplankton exploded across the oceans, ravenously consuming the sudden glut of excess nutrients. But when these organisms eventually died, they sank to the seafloor in colossal numbers. There, bacteria began to decompose them, consuming all the available oxygen in the process, every last molecule. The horrific result was ocean-wide anoxia. Vast, suffocating dead zones spread across the seas, places where no animal could possibly survive. Fish, corals, trilobites, and countless other exquisite marine species simply suffocated in waters that had, agonizingly quickly, become toxic to breathe. The very forests that had gifted life to the land had, simultaneously, strangled life in the sea. Two intertwined ecosystems, bound by the same relentless water cycle, locked in a slow, fatal embrace. The lush, thriving world above and the slowly dying world below were inextricably linked by these fatal currents, rivers of death pouring from the land into the sea. What strikes us as uniquely horrifying about this catastrophe is not its suddenness, but its agonizingly protracted timeline. This was no overnight extinction event. It was a slow, relentless unfolding over millions of years, marked by successive pulses of death. Each time, forests expanded, soils thickened, and the relentless torrent of nutrient runoff intensified, causing oceanic oxygen levels to crash, then crash again. Every new wave of destruction wiped out species that, against all odds, had managed to survive the previous one. The marine ecosystem never found stable ground. Recovery between these devastating pulses was always incomplete, fragile, and temporary. For an astounding 25 million years, marine life was caught in a tormenting slow-motion suffocation, while vast forests steadily conquered the continents above. And nothing, it seemed, could halt this destructive process, because its root cause lay embedded in the very phenomenon of life's growth itself. Evolution had inadvertently constructed a trap from which evolution could not extract itself. Each new tree that sprouted only deepened the wound in the planet's oceans. The truly chilling implication of this ancient history reverberates into our present moment. Today, human agricultural practices and our intensive use of fertilizers are unleashing phosphorus and nitrogen into the oceans at rates that not only rival but often exceed the scale of the Devonian nutrient flood. Consequently, dead zones are expanding at an alarming pace in critical regions like the Gulf of Mexico, the Baltic Sea, and countless coastal waters across the globe. The very mechanism that brought complex marine life to the brink of collapse 380 million years ago is now repeating itself, terrifyingly compressed into mere decades rather than millions of years. The Devonian forests stand as a stark, ancient warning, vividly demonstrating what happens when one integral part of the biosphere overwhelms another. They reveal that life itself, not some external malice or cosmic impact, can be the unexpected agent of mass extinction simply through the cold, impartial logic of chemistry and its inevitable consequences. And perhaps most significantly, they show us that the fossil record carries powerful warnings we have yet to fully comprehend or act upon. The past, it seems, has not yet finished speaking its deepest truths. Now, for number 6, the ancient footprints that fundamentally should not exist. In the year 2021, a dedicated team of researchers toiling within the vast expanse of White Sands National Park in New Mexico unveiled a discovery that sent genuine shockwaves reverberating throughout the entire archaeological community. They had unearthed fossilized human footprints, perfectly preserved within ancient lakebed sediments. Crucially, radiocarbon dating of seeds meticulously embedded in these identical geological layers yielded an astonishing age range for these prints, between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. If these dates held true, it meant that humans were actively walking across the landscape of what is now New Mexico right at the very peak of the last ice age, a staggering 6,000 years earlier than the established mainstream timeline for human arrival in the Americas had ever allowed. This groundbreaking discovery truly presented an undeniable binary. It was either a profound error in dating, or it heralded nothing less than a complete revolution in our understanding of early human history. There was simply no middle ground to be found. Naturally, the scientific community initially reacted with a healthy dose of skepticism. Critics swiftly pointed out that the seeds initially used for dating came from an aquatic plant. They argued that such plants possessed the capacity to absorb ancient carbon from the surrounding lake water, potentially making the samples appear far older than their actual age. For 2 intense years, this debate raged fiercely across scientific journals and conferences. Then, in 2023, a meticulous follow-up study was published. This time, researchers employed multiple entirely independent dating methods, including optically stimulated luminescence and direct radiocarbon dating of terrestrial plant material. The results were unequivocal. They robustly confirmed the original findings. The footprints were undeniably real. The ancient dates were undeniably accurate. Humans were, without question, present in North America during the last glacial maximum, a period when most of the continent was believed to be an uninhabited wilderness, locked beneath colossal, impassable ice sheets. The textbooks, it turned out, were fundamentally mistaken. What makes the White Sands footprints particularly unsettling is the profound insight they offer into the very people who created them. The vast majority of these prints belong to children and adolescents, with only occasional adult tracks interspersed. They reveal patterns of movement across soft lakebed mud that strongly suggest routine daily activities, rather than the focused, linear paths of migration or the deliberate movements of a hunting party. These children walked in groups. Sometimes they were carrying loads, sometimes they were playfully running, and at other times simply pausing for a moment. These were not mere travelers passing through an unfamiliar land. These were residents, families, entire communities who had lived in this specific area for long enough that their children used the lakebed as an integrated, normal part of their everyday lives. This was home for them. Their lives were intimately woven into the fabric of this ancient land. The implications of this shatter decades, if not a full century, of archaeological consensus. If humans were comfortably living in New Mexico 23,000 years ago, they must have arrived on the continent even earlier still, because established populations do not spontaneously materialize from nothing. They had to travel from somewhere. The traditional Bering Land Bridge theory posits human entry into the Americas at approximately 15,000 years ago, coinciding with the opening of ice-free corridors through the massive glaciers that covered Canada. But 23,000 years ago, those vital corridors were completely sealed shut. The only conceivable paths involved either navigating the Pacific coast by boat or traversing some other route that remains entirely unknown to us. Both of these options demand a level of technology and specialized knowledge that we previously believed simply did not exist at that distant time. It means the very first Americans possessed capabilities far beyond anything we had ever granted them. What makes these footprints particularly unsettling is their profound implications. For well over a century, American archaeology operated on the firm assumption that humans arrived on the continent relatively recently, around 13,000 to 15,000 years ago, as part of a singular migration that swiftly spread across the landscape. The White Sands prints conclusively dismantle that long-held model. Humans were undeniably here thousands of years earlier, which fundamentally means the entire archaeological timeline of the Americas must be drastically reevaluated and rewritten. Every single assumption about when people arrived, how they dispersed, what they hunted, and how they lived must now be called into question. An entire academic discipline now finds itself standing on ground it no longer understands, its very foundations visibly cracked. The truly haunting aspect of this discovery lies in what we have irrevocably lost. If humans were indeed living in North America for 8,000 years longer than our previous understanding suggested, then 8 millennia of human history are simply missing from our records. Entire civilizations, each with its unique cultures, distinct languages, and interwoven ways of life, existed on this continent during the Ice Age, yet we possess almost no tangible evidence of them. The White Sands footprints stand as one of the handful of physical traces we have of a population that must have numbered in the thousands, or even tens of thousands, stretching across the continent. Everything else, every tool, every shelter, every story, every name, has been utterly erased by the relentless march of time, the crushing weight of the ice, and the simple, uncaring indifference of geological processes. We are peering at the literal footprints of a lost world, pressed into ancient lakebed mud during the absolute coldest period of the last ice age. And we remain utterly clueless about who they were, where they originated from, or what fate ultimately befell them. The children who scampered across that primordial mud are now a ghost population, visible to us only through the faint imprints of their feet. They left behind no other message. Number 5. The Permian extinction and the Great Dying that almost ended everything. Approximately 252 million years ago, precisely at the boundary separating the Permian and Triassic periods, Earth endured the closest brush with total annihilation that life has ever managed to survive. Scientists formally refer to it as the Permian-Triassic extinction event, but its unofficial nickname far more accurately conveys its cataclysmic scale: the Great Dying. During this period, a staggering 96% of all marine species vanished from existence. Roughly 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species disappeared from the face of the Earth. Even insects, which had never before suffered a mass extinction and have never suffered one since, lost the vast majority of their diversity. Life on Earth teetered on a razor-thin margin, nearly ceasing to exist completely, and we are still grappling to fully comprehend precisely what transpired. The mechanism of this immense devastation was unlike anything recorded in the fossil record, either before or since. It wasn't a single, isolated catastrophe, but rather a cascading series of environmental disasters that continuously compounded upon each other over hundreds of thousands of years. The initial trigger appears to have been the Siberian Traps, one of the most massive volcanic eruptions in Earth's entire history, which spewed molten rock across an area larger than modern-day Europe. These monumental eruptions persisted for nearly 2 million years, unleashing carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere at rates that absolutely dwarfed anything modern industrial civilization has ever produced. The planet's intricate climate system utterly collapsed under this immense strain. What followed was a horrific sequence of events, each horror building upon the last. Global temperatures soared by as much as 10 degrees Celsius or 18 degrees Fahrenheit, directly transforming once thriving tropical seas into waters warm enough to kill most marine life outright. Ocean acidification then began to dissolve the protective shells of countless creatures that had dominated the seas for 200 million years. Oxygen levels in the water plummeted drastically, creating vast anoxic dead zones that spanned entire ocean basins. On land, the devastating combination of intense heat, prolonged drought, and atmospheric poisoning annihilated forests and transformed once fertile continents into barren wastelands. The geological records from that period hold a chilling truth, something known as the coal gap. This was a devastating span of 10 million years when almost no coal deposits formed anywhere on Earth, a direct consequence of so few forests being left to create them. What makes the Permian extinction uniquely terrifying is what the rock record ultimately unveils about its final, horrific stages. Geologists meticulously studying the end Permian sediments have uncovered incontrovertible evidence of widespread hydrogen sulfide poisoning on a truly global scale. As the oceans slowly suffocated and lost their vital oxygen, sulfate-reducing bacteria flourished in those lifeless waters, churning out unimaginable quantities of hydrogen sulfide gas. This deadly gas then bubbled up from the vast seas, stealthily drifting across entire continents, lethally poisoning every single creature that dared to breathe it in. The very sky itself became a toxic, suffocating shroud. Animals that had miraculously endured the scorching heat, the relentless drought, and the corrosive acidification now succumbed, gasping for breath in air that had become utterly unbreathable. The once clear boundary between sea and land dissolved as both environments became equally hostile to all life. The truly unsettling aspect of this event is just how narrowly life on Earth managed to survive. Detailed modeling studies grimly suggest that if the Siberian Traps had continued their cataclysmic eruptions for even a few 100,000 years longer, or if the cascading effects had triggered slightly different feedback loops, our planet might have irrevocably lost the remaining 4% of its species as well. Life on our world came within mere inches of total, irrecoverable extinction. Every single animal, every plant, every fungus, every complex organism alive today is a direct descendant from that tiny handful of lineages that, against unimaginable odds, somehow clung to existence through that prolonged nightmare. The grand family tree of modern life funnels through a bottleneck so unbelievably narrow that it seems almost impossible anything could have made it through at all. However, the most haunting implication lies in the sheer amount of time required for Earth's recovery. After the terrifying Permian extinction finally abated, our planet took approximately 10 million long years to even begin developing ecosystems of comparable complexity to what had existed before the catastrophe. For 10 agonizing million years, the planet remained a desolate wasteland, populated by only a few surviving species that slowly, painstakingly radiated into new forms. The fossil record of the early Triassic period is overwhelmingly dominated by disaster taxa, opportunistic species that thrived in the chilling absence of their former competitors. This was followed by a slow, agonizing rebuilding of biodiversity from virtually nothing. The Great Dying stands as irrefutable proof that life is not invincible. It can be pushed to the precipice of total oblivion by processes we are only just beginning to comprehend, and the subsequent recovery can easily take longer than the entire recorded history of human civilization, repeated 1,000 times over. Now, for number 4. The Nazca Lines. enigmatic geoglyphs carved by people who had no means to properly view their own colossal creations. In the stark coastal desert of southern Peru, etched into the reddish-brown surface of a vast and arid plateau, lie some of the most inexplicable and awe-inspiring creations in all of human prehistory. The Nazca Lines are truly enormous geoglyphs, intricate figures and geometric shapes meticulously drawn into the desert floor by carefully removing the darker surface stones to reveal the much lighter soil beneath. There are well over 800 perfectly straight lines, 300 complex geometric figures, and more than 70 distinct animal and plant designs, some of which stretch for hundreds of meters across the ground. These masterpieces were painstakingly created by the Nazca culture between approximately 500 BCE and 500 CE, meaning some of these enigmatic works are now more than 2,500 years old. What makes the Nazca Lines particularly unsettling is the fundamental paradox at the very heart of their existence. These immense figures are so vast that they can only be fully appreciated from the air, hundreds of meters above the ground. From ground level, they are essentially invisible. Imagine a person standing directly in the middle of the giant hummingbird geoglyph, which itself spans over 90 meters in length. They would see nothing but a confusing series of lines in the dirt with no discernible sense of the overall shape or design. Yet the Nazca people possess no aircraft, no hot air balloons that we know of, and absolutely no apparent way to view their monumental creations from above. They dedicated generations to crafting massive artworks that they themselves could never truly experience. The incredible precision of these lines is equally disturbing. Many of them stretch for several kilometers, appearing almost perfectly straight despite the often uneven terrain. The geometric shapes exhibit mathematical precision, with angles and proportions that strongly suggest incredibly careful planning and advanced measurement techniques. The animal figures, a monkey, a spider, a condor, a hummingbird, are far from primitive. Their artistic sophistication competes with the creations of cultures with far more advanced technology. Yet the Nazca people crafted these masterpieces using only stone tools, wooden stakes, and lengths of rope. And despite the monumental scale of these works, they made almost no errors. The true purpose of these lines remains shrouded in complete mystery. For decades, theories have sprouted and multiplied, but none have achieved widespread consensus. Some researchers propose they were astronomical markers, meticulously aligned with the rising and setting of stars or the precise moment of the solstice sun. Others speculate they served as sacred pathways, trodden by priests in elaborate religious rituals, perhaps beseeching the heavens for rain in their parched desert home. Still others suggest these geoglyphs were offerings to the mountain gods, powerful deities believed to command water and fertility, prayers made visible, designed to be seen from the soaring heights where these gods supposedly dwelled. None of these explanations, however, fully account for the sheer scale, the staggering variety, or the almost obsessive dedication clearly poured into their creation. What truly makes the Nazca Lines so profoundly unsettling is the sheer volume of labor they represent. Crafting even a single large geoglyph would have demanded hundreds of workers toiling for weeks, perhaps even months under the scorching sun, to conceive and then execute thousands of these over 1,000 years. That speaks to a civilizational commitment, an almost incomprehensible devotion to a project that had no obvious practical utility. These weren't magnificent monuments to revered kings, nor elaborate tombs for the honored dead, nor even formidable fortifications against invading enemies. No, these were colossal images etched into the very surface of the earth, on a scale their creators themselves could never truly behold, for reasons that remain forever locked within a vanished worldview and a language long since silenced. The Nazca people poured incomprehensible resources, their time, their energy, their very lives, into something whose value we simply cannot grasp, because we have utterly lost the context of its original intent. The most haunting aspect is the chilling implication about the Nazca themselves. They existed in one of the planet's most arid environments, where survival hinged on an unending, relentless battle for water, for food, for shelter. Yet, they willingly committed generations of their labor to create art for an audience they never truly identified. Whether this intended audience comprised gods, ancient ancestors, distant stars, ethereal monitors, or something else entirely, the Nazca profoundly believed in its existence. They were convinced it was watching. They crafted these lines precisely because they were certain that someone or something was gazing down upon them. Then, around the year 500 CE, the Nazca culture crumbled. Its collapse was likely triggered by a prolonged, devastating drought, a brutal consequence of extreme El Niño climate shifts. The lines, though, remained perfectly preserved in the unforgiving desert air, patiently awaiting the arrival of modern aircraft to finally unveil them to human eyes capable of seeing their full magnificence. The audience the Nazca had so earnestly imagined never materialized. Instead, we arrived, and even today, we still don't truly understand what profound message they were so desperately trying to convey to us. Number 3. The Toba catastrophe and the near extinction of humanity. Approximately 74,000 years ago, a volcano on the island of Sumatra, in what is now modern-day Indonesia, unleashed an eruption of such unimaginable power it dwarfs anything recorded in the entirety of human history. This Toba supervolcano expelled an estimated 2,800 cubic kilometers of magma, cementing its place as the largest volcanic eruption of the last 25 million years. The force of this explosion was roughly 5,000 times greater than the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. Ash from the Toba eruption has been discovered in sediment cores as far away as the continent of Africa, blanketing the entire Indian subcontinent in layers several meters thick. The skies across the entire northern hemisphere were plunged into darkness for years, possibly even for decades. What followed was a global catastrophe that very nearly brought the human story to a terrifying, abrupt end. The eruption injected colossal quantities of sulfur dioxide high into the stratosphere, triggering a planetary cooling event now known as a volcanic winter. Temperatures across vast swathes of the world plummeted by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. Rainfall patterns utterly collapsed. Forests withered and died. Herbivores starved en masse, and the predators that relied on them soon followed their gruesome fate. Across Africa, Asia, and Europe, ecosystems that had sustained burgeoning human populations for tens of thousands of years suddenly became brutally hostile to all life. The oppressive darkness persisted long enough to devastate the harvests of any species dependent on consistent sunlight and predictable seasons. Genetic evidence today provides us with chilling insights into what truly befell our ancestors during this harrowing period. Studies of human DNA paint a stark picture. A severe population bottleneck emerged around the time of the Toba eruption, drastically shrinking the global population of Homo sapiens to a mere 3 to 10,000 breeding individuals. The entire human species, once spread across continents, was reduced to a fraction of a modern small town's inhabitants. Every single person alive today is a descendant of this tiny, resilient group. Our genetic diversity is strikingly limited compared to other great apes, precisely because we all share the same handful of ancestors who miraculously survived that harrowing volcanic winter. What makes the Toba catastrophe truly chilling is how perilously close humanity came to oblivion without ever suspecting it. For the majority of the 20th century, archaeologists and geneticists had no inkling that our species had navigated such a treacherous bottleneck. The truth only surfaced through the painstaking analysis of mitochondrial DNA in the 1990s, coupled with sediment core studies that unearthed the global ash layer from the eruption. The entire harrowing saga was pieced together from fragments of genetic code and faint bands of volcanic debris scattered across half the planet. Without the tools of modern science, we would possess no memory of the disaster that nearly wiped us off the face of the Earth. The implications ripple through every facet of modern human existence. Because we all stem from such a minuscule surviving population, humanity exhibits a degree of genetic uniformity that continues to astound biologists. A single troop of chimpanzees in West Africa, for instance, harbors more genetic diversity than the entirety of the human species spread across 7 continents. This shared origin in the post-Toba bottleneck means that every racial group, every ethnic population, every isolated community on Earth is, at its core, one enormous extended family. We are separated by only a few thousand generations from common ancestors who huddled together in the same shrinking refugees during that unimaginable volcanic winter. The most unsettling realization is the chilling prospect that it could happen again. Toba remains an active supervolcano. So do others, including the Yellowstone caldera in the United States, the Phlegraean fields in Italy, and the Taupo volcanic zone in New Zealand. Any one of these slumbering giants could erupt on a similar cataclysmic scale, unleashing another volcanic winter that would push modern civilization to its absolute limits in ways no previous disaster has ever tested us. The last time a supervolcano erupted, it brutally winnowed humanity down to a mere handful of survivors, clinging to existence in isolated pockets of hostile habitat. The volcano cared nothing for our mastery of fire, our complex language, or our sprawling across continents. It simply erupted, and we nearly perished. The very same elemental forces that almost annihilated our ancestors still lie buried beneath the Earth's crust, silently waiting. Our second major impact event, the Younger Dryas impact and the thousand-year winter that fundamentally reshaped our world. Approximately 12,900 years ago, as the last ice age was drawing to an end, an incomprehensible catastrophe struck the northern hemisphere. Temperatures, which had been steadily rising for millennia, abruptly plummeted back toward glacial levels within a mere few decades. This cataclysmic climate event, now known as the Younger Dryas, persisted for approximately 1,200 years, dragging regions that were on the cusp of temperate stability back into the icy grip of Ice Age conditions. Glaciers surged forward once more, forests withered and retreated. The North American megafauna, already battling pressures from human hunters and shifting climates, endured a final devastating wave of extinctions that erased mammoths, mastodons, and dozens of other magnificent species from the continent forever. And to this day, scientists are fiercely debating its cause. The traditional explanation centers on the abrupt collapse of ice dams that had been holding back the enormous meltwater Lake Agassiz, a vast inland sea covering much of central Canada at the close of the Pleistocene era. According to this theory, the sudden, colossal discharge of frigid freshwater into the North Atlantic drastically disrupted ocean circulation patterns, effectively shutting down the Gulf Stream and plunging the Northern Hemisphere back into full-blown glacial conditions. It's a cogent explanation, one that aligns with much of the available evidence. However, in 2007, a team of researchers published a highly controversial alternative hypothesis that has cleaved the scientific community ever since. This alternative hypothesis describes a catastrophic event, a comet or asteroid that splintered and exploded in the atmosphere directly over North America around 12,900 years ago. This celestial impact would have instantly ignited colossal wildfires, blasting immense quantities of debris high into the stratosphere. That dust and smoke then cloaked the entire planet, triggering a rapid and profound cooling. Compelling evidence for this cataclysmic event has emerged from geological layers across multiple continents. Researchers have discovered telltale markers such as nanodiamonds, microscopic spherules, and elevated platinum levels, all precisely dated to that specific, narrow window of time. Further bolstering the theory, a colossal impact crater hidden beneath Greenland's Hiawatha Glacier was unearthed in 2018. Its estimated size and age align strikingly with the timing and scale of such an impact, adding a crucial piece to this unsettling puzzle. What lends the Younger Dryas its particularly chilling edge is the widespread devastation it wrought upon human populations. The flourishing Clovis culture, which had spread across the vast expanses of North America in the centuries leading up to the Younger Dryas, underwent an almost total annihilation. Their distinctively crafted spear points vanished abruptly from the archaeological record, signaling a catastrophic demographic collapse. Entire regions once vibrant with human communities lay desolate and uninhabited for generations. The very same chilling phenomenon that spelled doom for the mammoths also decimated the human hunters who pursued them. Whatever its ultimate cause, the Younger Dryas fundamentally reshaped the demographic landscape of the Americas, leaving an indelible imprint that still echoes in the genetic patterns of modern indigenous populations. The impact hypothesis, if definitively confirmed, carries a profoundly disturbing implication for us all. It would mean that modern civilization has thrived within an exceptionally stable climatic window, not because such stability is the norm, but precisely because we have, by sheer luck, avoided another similar cosmic collision. The vast asteroid belt still teems with innumerable fragments. Comets continue their regular, silent pilgrimages through the inner solar system. The event that reset the Northern Hemisphere nearly 13,000 years ago isn't a historical anomaly, safely confined to the distant past. It represents a recurring, ever-present possibility capable of striking again on timescales that our current technology is utterly incapable of predicting. The most haunting revelation is that the Younger Dryas unfolded right at the very precipice of human civilization. The era of upheaval finally concluded around 11,700 years ago. Yet within just a few millennia of its end, humans in the Middle East had already mastered agriculture, constructed the first enduring settlements, and embarked upon the long, arduous journey that would ultimately lead to towering cities, written language, and everything we now encompass within the single word: history. Had the Younger Dryas persisted for just a few thousand years longer, or had its impact been even more severe, human civilization as we understand it might never have had the chance to blossom. We now exist within this fragile, slender band of stable climate that emerged after that last monumental disruption, with absolutely no assurance that the next inevitable disruption isn't already hurtling towards us. Both the fossil record and the ancient ice cores whisper the same stark truth. Stability is the rare exception. Catastrophe, it seems, is the enduring rule. Shifting gears to another epoch-defining event, the Chicxulub impact, and the day the world truly ended for an entire planetary ecosystem. Approximately 66 million years ago, on an otherwise unremarkable day during the Cretaceous period, a colossal chunk of rock estimated to be about 10 kilometers wide slammed into the shallow seas of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The sheer force of this impact unleashed energy roughly equivalent to 100 trillion tons of TNT, carving out a crater more than 180 kilometers in diameter and instantly vaporizing everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius of ground zero. This asteroid, now famously known as the Chicxulub impactor, ruthlessly brought down the curtain on the dominion of the dinosaurs and triggered the extinction of a staggering 75% of all species across Earth. But the intricate, horrific details of exactly what unfolded in the hours, days, and years following that impact are far more terrifying than any horror story human imagination has ever conceived. The very first consequence was the unimaginably powerful blast wave. Within mere seconds of the impact, a column of vaporized rock and asteroid material erupted violently through the atmosphere, soaring to altitudes of thousands of kilometers. Molten debris was ejected with such incredible velocity that some fragments completely escaped Earth's gravitational pull. The rest of this superheated material rained back down across the entire globe, friction heating the atmosphere to such an infernal degree that the very sky itself began to glow a terrifying, angry red. Paleontologists meticulously studying the impact layer sediments have unearthed chilling evidence. The entire atmosphere soared to temperatures hot enough to simultaneously ignite dry vegetation across the entire planet. For hours immediately following the devastating impact, the sky above every single continent was quite literally ablaze. Massive wildfires ravenously consumed forests across multiple continents in a single day. Any creature that couldn't burrow deep underground or plunge into the depths of a body of water was incinerated alive by the searing radiant heat pouring down from the glowing heavens. Fossilized remains from sites around the globe grimly display evidence of mass death events perfectly consistent with catastrophic thermal radiation exposure. Dinosaurs, creatures that had triumphantly survived for an astonishing 160 million years, perished within mere hours of the impact, their bodies strewn across landscapes that had instantly transformed into fiery ovens. The largest terrestrial animals that had ever roamed the Earth were reduced to mere charred bone fragments, and ash before that brutal day had even concluded. What followed was, unimaginably, even worse. The initial impact had explosively ejected enormous quantities of pulverized rock and sulfur compounds high into the stratosphere, immediately creating a dense global dust veil that mercilessly blocked out the sun's light for agonizing months, even years. The surviving organisms, already brutally devastated by the initial hellish heat, now faced a prolonged frozen darkness where photosynthesis, the very basis of life, became utterly impossible. Plants withered and died. Herbivores with no vegetation to consume starved to death. Predators dependent on the herbivores for sustenance swiftly followed suit. The global food chain completely collapsed, bottom up, as an oppressive darkness settled over a planet that had been burning fiercely only weeks before. Temperatures plummeted by more than 25 degrees Celsius in some regions, and ice began to form in places that had been lush, tropical oases only a few short months earlier. What truly elevates the Chicxulub impact to an unparalleled level of terror is the chilling precision with which geological evidence has allowed us to reconstruct it. Scientists, meticulously analyzing drilling cores extracted from the crater itself, have meticulously pieced together the event with second-by-second accuracy. They now know the asteroid approached at an angle of approximately 60 degrees from the horizontal, a trajectory that, chillingly, happens to be the worst possible angle for maximum atmospheric damage. They've also discovered that the impact excavated deep into sulfur-rich rocks, which dramatically amplified the cooling effect by orders of magnitude. Furthermore, they understand that if the asteroid had struck almost anywhere else on Earth, whether in the much deeper ocean or on less sulfur-rich continental crust, the resulting extinction event might have been far less severe. The dinosaurs did not simply experience bad luck, they endured the absolute worst possible luck, striking at the worst possible angle, landing in the worst possible location, and arriving at the worst possible moment. The most profoundly disturbing implication, however, is what this impact reveals about the fundamental fragility of even the most dominant species. Dinosaurs were, unequivocally, the most successful vertebrates in Earth's entire history. They had reigned supreme over the planet for an astonishing 160 million years, a time frame roughly 800 times longer than modern humans have even existed. They had diversified into every conceivable ecological niche, from feathery flying predators to multi-ton plant eaters. Over their immense reign, they had weathered countless climate shifts, dramatic sea level changes, and numerous smaller catastrophes. Yet, none of it ultimately mattered. A single rock, about the size of a city, falling from the sky on an otherwise ordinary day, was all it took for their entire world to end within a matter of hours. Dominance offers no guarantee of survival. Adaptation offers no guarantee of survival. Even immense prior success offers no guarantee of survival. The only thing that ensured mammals would ultimately inherit the Earth was a particular asteroid happening to intersect a particular orbital path at a particular fateful moment. Everything else truly was just luck. The sky above us still contains these same kinds of rocks. Orbital paths still intersect. And somewhere out there, hidden in the vast dark emptiness between worlds, the next Chicxulub is already moving, its trajectory set.